when I launch ads, I'm always looking for ways to minimize the cost, and we have several levers that we can pull on cost minimization. I'll start this out by saying, first of all, LinkedIn is unapologetically an expensive platform. Like, your CPCs are going to be much higher on LinkedIn, and it's not as kind to high CTRs as other platforms. If you have a really high click-through rate on Twitter or Facebook or even AdWords, you are going to get like a giant discount on your CPCs. They're going to charge you much less because you're making them money much more often. With LinkedIn, there is an element of that, but it's not very generous. So sometimes I'll even see campaigns that have a higher click-through rate to the same audience, and they cost 3 or 4 cents more. So there's not enough generosity there. So because of that, I have a couple levers that I walk through. So I'll walk you through the process. If I launch an ad, immediately, well, I walked through in this other segment where if I launch an ad, I want to launch really aggressively with my bids if I can. If budget's tight, then that doesn't make sense. You just start low. But I'll start high, and I will start lowering that bid every 2 days to see how low I can get that click-through rate. How low I can get that CPC. And if I can keep lowering it all the way down to the minimum, with sponsored content, a lot of the minimums are like $4.50 and $5. So if I can bid all the way down there, great, I'm getting the lowest cost per click that's allowed on the platform. So that's great. If I launch, and a lot of times this will happen, I'll get CTRs that are average. Maybe it's like a 0.35% on sponsored content. I'll get to a point where I lower my bid and traffic drops off. And so then you raise your bid back up until you get your traffic back. So it's this balancing act of, okay, what's the most I can minimize my costs while keeping my client traffic? My trick to that is, if you're in that situation where you didn't get a great relevancy score, you're not getting a good click-through rate, the only real chance you have is go reiterate your ads. Go find something to change. Maybe it's images. The top 2 things I've found make the biggest difference are the intro and the image. So go and find new variations, iterate very quickly, find something that gets good click-through rates, because then you can move to the next part of this funnel. So let's say that your boss comes to you and they say, this was great, let's double our traffic, we're willing to double our spend. A lot of times, if you've followed this implementation where you lower your bids until you get where you want, the only lever you have, because you're already spending right to where your budget naturally lands, to double, the only lever you have is to increase your bids. And so what I tell people is, anytime that you double traffic, expect that it's naturally going to be less efficient. So you have to be okay with that. You can't say, oh wow, we have a $78 cost per lead. I'm great with that all day. Let's scale, because if you've already followed what I've talked about before, you've minimized your cost for that amount of traffic. You need to bid up or launch ads that perform better to get there. So now there's the holy grail. About every 5 launches, I'll find an ad that performs spectacularly. This is, more than 3x the average. Anytime that I get an ad that performs over a 1% click-through rate, that's when I know I'm going to get a big discount by switching from CPC bidding and bidding by the impression. And the reason why is because LinkedIn has a natural equivalency there where they say, oh, on average, this cost per click is equal to this cost per 1,000 impression. And so they find this equivalency. Well, if you're getting clicked on 3 times more often than average, then you get a giant discount, because you're going to say, well, LinkedIn thinks that I'm going to pay, let's say it's $6 for this click, but I'm getting clicked on 3 times what their average is. I'm going to get a $3 or a $2 cost per click by bidding CPM. So the difference here is, when you find that holy grail, of course you want to go all in on that, right? You have a 1% click-through rate, you're going to switch to CPM, you're now getting clicks for 1/3 the cost, which is fantastic, but you have to watch this. And the reason why is because it is display advertising. You find something that LinkedIn wants to show this ad because they're making so much money off of it, and it's getting clicked on so much, so they know their members like it, they're going to run that heavily. When they run that heavily, they're going to saturate an audience really fast. And once an audience saturates, that click-through rate is not going to stay 1% for very long. So when I find the Holy Grail and performing over 1% and I bid CPM, I'm going to watch that. After anywhere between 5 days and a week, I'm probably going to have to switch that back to CPC after the audience is tired of it. And that's just how it works. So the one other thing that you need to keep in consideration here, a lot of people will say, okay, I'm bidding CPM. I know this ad performs really well. I'm going to skimp on my bid. I'm going to bid it down. Don't do it. Fight the urge, because what happens is when you bid low on CPM, LinkedIn is naturally trying to figure out who takes the first position, who takes the second, who takes the third, just like search. But the difference is in search, you fall one position on the page when you lose a position. With sponsored content, you drop 11 slots down the feed. And of course, every slot down the feed, I'll give you an example, a concrete example. When I had an ad that was performing at 1.2% CTR. When I bid it down and was landing in the second position, I was getting a 0.2%. So you can imagine if I'm getting a 1.2% bidding CPM, I'm having just a great day. If I'm bidding CPM and I'm getting 0.2%, so lower than the average, my CPCs just went way up. So you need to bid aggressively to make sure that you can land in that top position.